Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Techno Critic, and it's time for my review of M. Night Shyamalan's Wayward Pines. And I have to say, oh my god, no. I know I'm going to catch a lot of hell for this, because of all the fan bases out there, Shyamalan's fans are the most rabid. And when you consider the movies they like, for example, there's an actual following for Avatar: The Last Airbender, not ironically, not nostalgically, but genuinely. So this is not a group of people that you genuinely want to piss off. But you want to know something? I've made my feelings on Shyamalan clear many times. And you know what? This TV show is just more of everything he has ever done. Look, I was actually genuinely hopeful. I thought to myself, you know what? If Shyamalan pulls this off, Shyamalan might actually get the length of time he needs to tell his story, because TV shows you're able to do that. He might be able to focus more on this tiny details and the twists that he likes to do. For just a brief instance, there was a spark of, hey, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, Shyamalan might find on the small screen what he was not able to do, or what he was not able to live up to on the big screen. Shyamalan might actually be good. But you know what? I was absolutely wrong to expect that. When you look at his record, Lady in the Water, The Happening, and I include The Happening there because, you know what? As enjoyably bad as that movie is, it's Mark Wahlberg that makes that movie enjoyably bad, not Shyamalan. If you look at Devil, if you look at Last Airbender, this television show has all the hallmarks of his previous filmography. It's like a concentrated shot. It's almost like a masterclass in everything Shyamalan has done on the big screen in just one season. It's almost amazing in everything he was able to cover, in everything that he was able to cram in terms of the acting, the lack of character development, the bloody scenery, and the sheer premise of the show. It's baffling. It is baffling to me how all of this managed to come together to create this show. But you know what? We have to talk about it. We have to go through it. So let's begin. We'll start with the premise. The show centers around Ethan Burke. He is an agent for the FBI, and it also focuses on his wife Teresa and their son Ben. Ethan, through a series of strange events, ends up in Wayward Pines, which is a small town with a gigantic fence around, an electrified fence, I might add. Already, this spells out that there's something sinister going on in a town which is already super strange. And about 4 episodes in, after being reunited with his family, after finding and losing somebody, after being reunited with one of his ex-lovers, he finally manages to escape over a cliff, and this allows him to discover, spoiler alert, 1, that the world has ended, 2, humanity has devolved into these creatures called aberrations, or Abbies for short, and these are essentially the zombies from 28 Days Later, and it's 2,000 years in the future. Alright, fair enough as a premise. The problem is with these kinds of premises, Shyamalan has never been able to build a story around it that is either believable or sensical. Because already there's within the story itself, there are a ton of plot holes. And the best comparison I can make to this is Devil. Devil, actually, you know what, this movie's kind of like a cross between Devil and Happening. Devil has the premise, okay, what would happen if the devil decided to target 4 people in an elevator and kill them based on the awful, awful sins that they have committed in their past? premises, sound. And here's the thing with the film. With just a little bit of tweaking, if they were to take out some of the sillier lines of dialogue, if they were to rewrite the characters just a little bit differently, if they were to pull out some of the sillier stuff, if they were to rearrange the story in just a slight way, and they were to change the scene, and they were to change the establishing scenery just a small amount, this would go from a movie that is universally panned to one of the great films, right? It had the potential to be such a great story. And while this premise itself is fairly generic, especially in terms of the disaster genre, where you have a humanoid threat that is essentially trying to wipe out whatever the small amount of humanity that is left. That's been done to death. But if it's done in the right way, if the story is told with characters that are compelling, and with a story that's sound, and you feel genuine sorrow, sympathy, fear, and joy for these characters when things happen to them, it takes it from a generic premise and it makes it viewable, it makes it watchable, it makes it enjoyable, even. Unfortunately, none of those elements, not even the scenery, comes into play to assist the premise in doing that. Overall, the show is not terrible. The writing itself is fairly. Let me put it this way: there's nothing in this TV show that happens that you don't expect to happen. Right? Right up until the very end, there's exactly one twist. And it's you don't expect it, but again, the setup is very sloppy for the ending. I'll just put it out there. Ben ends up going into a 3-year coma, and when he wakes up, the town has essentially changed back. Actually, no, I have to tell you the rest of the story first, but I can't do that until we get into the actual plot hole. So I'm going to hold off on that. Let's go into the acting. The acting is so typical of Shyamalan. And here's the thing: Shyamalan only directed one episode of this. He directed the first episode, but I feel that all the other directors, he must have been seriously involved, because the acting is so reminiscent of The Happening and so many other films of his, because the characters have just two expressions. They're either super serious or they have crazy eyes. And it doesn't matter what's happening in the show, they're either, with very few exceptions as the series go on, extremely stone-faced or genuinely insane. Now, to be fair, this is generally what you would expect from a group of people that are essentially imprisoned against their will. They're either extremely serious about everything that happens to them, or they've snapped and they've completely lost it, because you can't incarcerate people for that long a time. They will break. People have a breaking point, right? However, this makes it so hard to relate to the characters. It's the same problem I have with Piper Chapman in Orange is the New Black. After about 3/4 way through season 1, Piper snaps and she goes completely emotionless. And when she goes completely emotionless, it's very, very hard to relate to that character. And with these characters, it's happening with all of them. There's no joy, there's no sorrow, there's no fear, there's nothing. And when they do show those qualities, or if they just slightly show those qualities, it seems so far out of what they're normally doing. It doesn't seem natural. It's out of place, and at some points, it's even laughable. I mean, it's fairly easy to sympathize with the characters. You sympathize with their situation because you hear tons of exposition in the background about telling us about their lives, the lives they lead, the lives they had before that, the people that they left behind. Like, okay, that's fine. It makes it very easy to sympathize for them. But other than that, you don't connect with these characters. You don't feel for them because they don't act in a way that is normally human. Even in the worst circumstance, you can find humor in the situation, and a lot of people do. I mean, again, let's go back to Orange is the New Black, another show about people who are stuck in a situation where they can't leave. Despite all of the awful, awful things that have happened to them, and the fact that they're in prison, they still manage to find some moments of relief and some moments of joy in their incarceration. And if they had just shown 1 or 2 moments of that here, every happy moment feels forced. Everything is so chess set controlled that nothing feels natural. There's no natural emotion, and when it does happen, it's out of place or it's laughable. I mean, I'll give you an example. When escaping, there's a small group of people who want to escape. Some of them get caught, some of them manage to steal a semi-truck. And they drive it through the gate of the electrical fence. Okay, great, they made it. One guy grabs the dead body of the other one and drags it out because he feels, you know what, you can't bury him inside of this prison. If I'm going to bury him, he's going to be buried on free soil. Okay, great, courage of your convictions. I like that. But when he gets through the fence and he's on the outside, there's a brief moment where he's like, yes, we made it. And then immediately the Abbeys, out of nowhere, just descend and tear him to shreds. And because there's no breathing space between those 2 moments, and because you expect that to happen as soon as he escapes, you expect that there's going to be a moment of joy, immediately followed by the folly of his ignorance. You laugh at the scene because it's funny. It's genuinely funny because just the reversal of expectation itself, and you've had absolutely nothing to laugh at or feel about through the series up to this point. It creates this almost sociopathic situation when you're watching, where as soon as you see something bad happen to somebody, you want to laugh because it's like, okay, finally something is happening, and it feels humorous. I mean, it's out of place to be sure, but it's humorous. And just stuff like that. The characters throughout everything, they're just like, I mean, there are certain characters like the nurse and Dr. David Pilcher, the one who's running this whole thing. They're brother and sister, by the way. I mean, they're built up as crazy before, and then after you find out about the Abbeys, they try to normalize them, but they still carry this crazy vibe with them, and it makes it hard. You could see things from their point of view, but it's hard to want to see things from their point of view, if that even makes any sense. It's not good characterization is the point I'm trying to drive at here, while I've been talking around in circles. So yeah, the characters stink. The characters themselves are fine. It's just, well, they don't stink. They're fine. It's just that they don't have any of the emotional need. They don't have any of the emotion. They don't have any of the emotional weight there to make you care about them. And moving on from there, let's talk about the color scheme. The color scheme and the cinematography are also extremely Shyamalan. There is little to no color throughout this town. I mean, if they had filmed it in if they had filmed this whole show in black and white, you probably would not have lost anything, because look, I understand that this is being filmed in middle America or in some kind of post-apocalyptic time and everything's supposed to be serious. But it doesn't mean that your background has to be so drab. I mean, look, there's nothing but pine trees and mist and gray color rocks. and the town itself, everything looks washed out. Like you see scenes where there's color, but the colors are just not bright enough. They're not vivid enough to draw you in. You know you're watching a show the entire time. Like, it looks like someone put a gray filter. Like, they have boxes of flowers, but they don't. And you would expect that in a town where everything is gray and green and dark colors, if you have a box of flowers lining a street, you would expect, oh, that street looks colorful by comparison to the background. But it doesn't. And it's so typical of Shyamalan. When you consider Lady in the Water, when you consider The Happening, when you consider Devil, when you consider, oh dear God, Avatar: The Last Airbender had this problem. Everything was blue in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Well, guess what? Here everything is off gray. It's green gray, or it's red gray, or it's gray gray. It's everything, or it's blue gray. Everything is just gray. There's gray throughout everything. I mean, and cinematography wise, there's no shaky camera or anything, but there's a lot of quick cuts, and it makes it very difficult to watch this TV show, especially in terms of exposition. There's a point where Ethan Burke is going through some files, and he's looking at everybody's file, and they have all of this information listed that's actually very important information that they don't bring up later, but you still need to know it if you're going to watch this show. I had to go back, pause at each individual file, and read what the files were out slowly, because that's how much information there was in this thing. It talks about their lives before, it talks about the lives they have now. And if you want to get to know your character, you need that information. But the cuts are so quick. It's just a brief glimpse. If you watched it, you would get to see one line and then boop, move it on. One line, boop, move it on. It's almost as if they're trying to say, look, you got to watch this many, many times in order to understand everything. And you know what? Stop it. This is the age of pause and rewind. We don't need to rewatch it. Okay? We will get our information once, and then we will hate you for it, because you have to make us work for what we need. Don't make the audience work for the exposition, right? That's almost as bad as making the audience sit through long periods of exposition. It's almost as if Shyamalan is afraid of the show don't tell. Now, to be said, there is one scene where there is bright colors, and you're probably wondering, well, why am I so upset that there's no bright colors in a show that is post-apocalyptic and drab? I mean, there's many mediums of film and television where everything is post-apocalyptic, but everything is still drab. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. In Walking Dead, when they might be running from walkers, but you know what? When you see the sun shining off of cars when they're stuck in the highway, or just the way that the air shimmers when people are moving around, you understand that they're in a season, that they're in a place that it has mass and weight around them, and that the environment is affecting them in a way that genuinely matters. It's hot, it's cold, it's sweaty, it's awful, it's a nice day outside. And you want to know something? Here's the thing. When it's a nice day outside, but you have horrible stuff happening, it's a perfect contrast of, here's something that otherwise would be totally normal and otherwise enjoyable, but you know what? It's contrasting with what is actually going on. And you need that contrast in order for actions to have meaning and weight, and for what's happening for a character to actually matter. You need all of that stuff in order for it to just seem a little bit more real, a little bit more relatable, a little bit more just better in general. As I was saying, no, that's not true. There's two scenes. There's the final scene, which actually does exactly what I'm talking about. The final scene of this season, and I don't feel bad about spoiling this, is Benjamin wakes up from his 3-year coma, and you've just gotten this big exposition about how the town is going to change and things are going to get better and all this other kind of stuff. So he wakes up from his coma, he puts his clothes on, he runs outside of the hospital looking for his father, who he doesn't know is dead. And he's looking around, you've got all of these scenes with a merry-go-round going, and it's picnics, and the grass is green, and the sun is bright, and it looks like it's this gorgeous, beautiful day, contrasted with this scared kid running through the streets. And pan up, there's a bunch of bodies hanging from poles with signs around their necks that say, "Don't try and leave, cut the black." That is a perfectly contrasting situation, and oh my god, that was it's just a wave of endorphins of strangeness that you need in order to have a premise like this work. The other scene is a meeting between Teresa, who is Ethan's wife, and Kate, who is another FBI agent that Ethan worked with, and also his mistress, because he had an affair with her. And the two of these characters are meeting, and they're actually breaking the ice, and they're reconciling the issues that they have between them. And Teresa is wearing a dark blue sweater with patterns on it, so you can see this very intense blue coming off her. And Kate is wearing this big, bright red sun hat. And they're in a park, which means that there's greenery around them, and the sun is shining on. You can actually see colors, and it contrasts with the warmth of the scene, contrasts with the coldness of what's going on between the two of them, as they're trying to fix a dynamic that will be perpetually off kilter because of the actions of the man that stands in between them. Right? It's a good scene. It draws you in. You want to look at the people. You can see their faces. You can see color. You can see these are actual people living in an actual place. And it's a relief. It's a small spot of brightness in an otherwise sea of absolute grays. Oh boy. I mean, even when you look at the insides of buildings, they're drably decorated. There's not color anywhere. I mean, there's an entire scene that takes place inside of a school where the characters are in a perfectly white room, and it's bright, but again, it's colorless. It's just so stark and bleak. It doesn't draw you in. It pushes you. Everything you see just pushes you outwards. As I said, it's exactly what it's exactly what I saw in Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is the exact same cinematography, it's the exact same color scheming that I saw in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And you know what? It doesn't work. It absolutely does not work. Finally, let's look at we looked at the acting, we've looked at the cinematography. Let's look at the actual characters themselves before we get into plot holes. Okay, so alright, so let's explore the character arcs. Ethan is Ethan. You expect that the main character, the one that you're focusing on, would start at one place and then end on another and have some kind of growth overall. Well, he doesn't. He essentially stays the same throughout the entirety of this season. And I have to say, it doesn't do any. He literally doesn't go through any kind of change, any kind of process. He just learns about stuff and then makes decisions, and you feel that, okay, this is exactly what this character would do. There's nothing about him that changes in relation to the information he's given. He's just, okay, compartmentalize. It's the same problem that Kick-Ass had in Godzilla. Nothing seems to faze him. Nothing at all. His wife Teresa, she possesses the same character too. His son Ben is a dramatic teenager who remains a dramatic teenager throughout this whole thing. Really, the only characters that go through, I mean, even Kate doesn't seem to go through any character. The only two characters that really seem to do anything in terms of where they start and where they end is David Pilcher and his sister. That's essentially it. David starts out as this man who has this crazy idea based on a discovery that he made and a hypothesis that he has that, look, this is what's going to happen. I need to do something. And he does, okay? He starts off as this very noble character. You see it in terms of the exposition. Then you see where he gets to, all the frustration he has. You understand where his character is coming from. But then, through his interaction with Burke, after probably 3 episodes, this switch flips and he goes from, okay, here's this guy trying to deal with this problem, to here's this guy trying to get rid of this problem. And he goes completely nuts. He goes crazy. He basically tries to kill the town. Not just the town, not just the people who he has brought with him to try and save humanity. He shuts off the power, protecting everybody. This allows the Abbeys to run wild through Wayward Pines and essentially go about killing and eating as many people as they could find. On top of this, he decides that everybody who works for him is no good, including his own sister, who's been nothing but supportive to him. He decides, you know what, they have to go too. He decides, I'm going to put them all back in cryogenic stasis, and there they shall remain. He basically goes insane. That is his character arc. As for his sister, she starts off as this really sinister Nurse Ratched character from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and they're billing her as the bad guy, right? She's supposed to be this faux big bad. And then, or at least she's supposed to be the representative of the big bad, right? She's a direct link to whatever the big bad is. And after the secret is discovered, they really try to normalize her character with, okay, here's this woman who seems sinister, but her actual goal is the preservation of humanity. The problem is, she carries the same mannerism with her, and she still seems very off-putting and very sinister and very above and in the know, right? Like, she knows everything that's going on, and she makes no pretense to hide that something strange is going on, and that she is absolutely involved in it. She makes no attempt to hide that whatsoever. And then, come the end of it, she reaches this point where she sees her brother's gone mad. He's completely destroying the experiment. She kills him, and then she and Kate speak with each other. And it's like, look, we know about the Abbeys. We understand what you did. We want to help, and it seems like this great changing point. And then cut to the ending, and everything is back the way it was, probably worse than it was when we are first introduced to the town. Which means that this character underwent no arc whatsoever. It's a complete... Normally you have to wait for the next season for a character's growth to be retconned. It all happens within the same time. It happens within the same amount of episodes. It's up, right back down, because you know exactly who's responsible for everything. There's no subtlety to it. There's nothing like, oh, by the way, she may have been overpowered by another faction or something. No, because there's a statue of David saying he was a visionary, when everybody who knows what happens knows that he was a crazy motherfucker. It's heartbreaking. It really is. There are no good character arcs within this story, which is why none of these characters are compelling. Everyone else is one note. I mean, Teresa's suspicious, Ben is emo, Kate is the one Ethan wants to sleep with. That's everything that happens. I've literally just described everything that happens in this TV show. There's no growth. There's no change. It just is. Alright, and finally, let's get into the plot holes, because I don't want to prolong this any more than we have to. We're already like 30 minutes into this. Okay, so, like any good Shyamalan production, it has thousands of plot holes in it. First of all, we're supposed to believe that this is 2,000 years in the future. I don't care what era you're from. There is no machine that you can build today that will last for 2,000 years, because we're expected to believe that, okay, these people must undergo cryogenesis, they must be frozen for 2,000 years, while at the same time all of humanity collapses and devolves into this horrible post-apocalypse society. There's not even any people left on the planet to run anything. Question: How then is David Pilcher able to maintain all of this equipment? Because it's not like he's freezing one or two people. There's an experiment A, then there's an experiment B, and then he intends to do experiment C, which means if he woke up, it's a small town, it seems like a couple hundred people. He must have brought like 3,000 people with him if he's planning on doing, okay, here's group A, here's group B, here's group C, here's group D, right? If he's planning, if he's planned for all of these, he must have a couple thousand people locked up in cryogenic stasis in this mountain. Now, he was very rich. They explained that he's the owner of this big chemical weapons something or other manufacturing thing. So he decides, okay, I'm going to kidnap all these people. I'm going to put them in cryogenic stasis. Where is he getting the power? Is it solar? Is it nuclear? Like, look, there is not one power source, okay, that lasts for 2,000 years. What is powering his cryogenic tubes? What is keeping him and his sister alive for that long period of time? Okay, I'm not even interested in the cryogenics, right? We can explain that away, right? With some science mumbo jumbo. We don't even need to explain it. Where's his power coming from? Where? I honestly ask you, where? Unless David and a group of people woke themselves up, I don't know, every 500 years or every 10 years to go and check on things to make sure, hey, you know what, the wiring is not going to burn out, or the pipes are not going to corrode and burst. It's nonsensical. It really is. Okay. And on top of that, so he allegedly has a small group of volunteers, right? A small group of volunteers, enough that he is able to run and maintain an entire mountain where he has this big complex that generates electricity. It has all this food stored somehow for the people in the town. He has all of these vehicles that still work. And I'm not talking like electric vehicles. I'm talking gasoline vehicles. He's got gasoline-powered vehicles 2,000 years in the future. Gasoline with stabilizer lasts 1 year, right? Okay, there's no such thing as gasoline 2,000 years. Where is he getting all of his supplies from? First of all, how does he have enough supplies for all of this to be going on? Because allegedly he planned for this for like 20 years. He wakes up 2,000 years in the future. There was a whole town A that he set up, and apparently he has enough people to build not only a large defensive wall to keep the Abbeys out, but an entire bloody town. So the main problem is, he says, look, we don't have enough people. We didn't have enough volunteers. The reason that he hasn't told, the whole premise of the show is that you're in this town, you have to stay in this town and breed, but you don't know what's going on the outside of this wall. He claims he doesn't have enough people to rebuild humanity on his own, yet somehow he has enough people to build and maintain a mountain structure, a town, and somehow keep the lights on. I mean, even if you say, "Oh, it's computer generated," there's nothing. There's no, there's no there's no thinking. There's no explanation. There's nothing. It's just giant gaping plot holes. And they have computers that are up and running. Like, I have questions. I have serious amounts of questions. Like, for instance, did you save any of the internets? Did you? Like, all of our information, all of our videos, like, did you save any of that? Did you save movies? Did you bother with any of that stuff? Because you know what? You're building a town. At the very least, you could distract people. Like, he's worried that people are too worried with what's on the outside to keep the town going. Well, of course they're worried about what's on the outside. They have no distractions on the inside. They have literally nothing. It's, I mean, still have a cinema. Have computers set. Have things set up for at least normalcy. At least people could then learn about stuff and distract themselves in some way. I mean, look, I guarantee you, half of the problems would disappear if everybody in that town not only had cell phone access, but fucking Candy Crush. I guarantee you, if they had free-to-play gaming, none of them, absolutely none of them, would be worrying about what's outside the wall. They'd be worrying about, can I get my update to the next level? I have other questions like, what do they use for money in this town? Because apparently they just give people houses, and people are assigned work. Like, do people get paid? Is there a bank? Like, do they spend money? I mean that alone, I have questions about. There's a scene where Ethan Burke breaks into the mountain complex, right? He's like on the lower level. And they have all of these. Here's how they primarily kidnap people. They kidnap people by making their cars crash. Then when they were unconscious, they heavily sedated them. They took them and they put them in cryogenic stasis. Okay, fair enough. Why are you keeping the cars? Because there's this whole complex. It's just full of wrecked cars. In like mid condition, like the day they were wrecked, they're there. They somehow these cars survived 2,000 years of oxygen exposure and rust, and they're all fine. They're all perfectly fine. I mean, if I took my car and I stuck it in the garage, and then 2,000 years from now, it's not, even if the garage was still standing, which it won't be, the cars won't have inflated tires. They're not gonna. The door handles will fall off the second you try to open them. Things are gonna rust and break and weatherize. And here's the thing. He breaks into he finds his car. There's a small plastic bag and it says items of Teresa and Ethan Burke in it. And like his son's broken guitar is in the front seat still. I mean, why are they bothering to keep all this stuff? What possible reason do they need this for in 2,000 bloody years? Where are they getting their fuel from? Like, where are they getting their food? Did they freeze dry all the meat and cheese and vegetables and just keep it for 2,000 years? Because I'm telling you, that's not going to work either. There are so many things just wrong on a technical level with this story. Not to mention plot-wise with this story, it doesn't work. There are plot holes here that rival shit. I can't think of anything to compare it to, right? There's so many plot holes in this series. I literally cannot think of another TV series to go. If you've watched this TV show and you can find a TV series that has as many, if not more, plot holes than this, tell me about it. I want to see it, because I've never seen a TV show with this many plot holes in the story. It is baffling. It is baffling how any of this worked in terms of a premise. Even Revolution didn't have this many plot holes. And all their plot holes were on technical stuff, not story stuff. So overall, I can't say that Shyamalan's Wayward Pines is good. I can't recommend it. I strongly urge you to not watch it. Boycott this show. Shyamalan is washed up. This proves it beyond the shadow of a doubt. The man is going to be directing a movie from the producer who brought us Insidious 3 and a bunch of other, literally every other crappy horror movie you can name, like Ouya or any of those. This is the guy that produced it. He is going to be directing the film for this guy. It's called The Visit, by the way. I'm going to watch this because it's critic bait. I'm a critic. I need to see how awful this is going to be. If you're directing movies for the guy who brought you all of these bad movies because the director who originally brought you all those bad movies up and quit so he could go and do better stuff, your career is over. It's done. You're finished. Write a book. Go critique other films, although he's nowhere nearly qualified to critique other films. Do something else. Produce plays, right? Maybe Shyamalan could be a playwright. Like his work does not work for the silver screen or the small screen. Maybe it will work for the stage. Maybe one of his writings will. I'm begging you. Get out and stay out. It's not even bad anymore. It's just sad to watch this. Okay. Here's a man who had such a great career, and it's just spiraled. It's just spiraled. So it's beyond rock bottom. He hit rock bottom, and he started digging. I can't endorse this show. It's not good. I hope it doesn't get a second season. I seriously hope it doesn't get a second season. It probably will. But I'm hoping it doesn't, because this can't continue, okay? There has to be a point where somebody puts their foot down and says, no more. It's like, look, it's like if somebody really wanted to be a musician, but they have no ear for music. They can't play any musical instrument, even with their 10,000 hours. Look, Shyamalan. It's sink or swim. It's beyond sink or swim at this point. You are drowning. Go back to your roots. Make an indie play. Make an indie movie, right? And wow us, okay? Because you're gonna have to work really hard to make up for the bad reputation that you've spun for yourself over all this time. I mean, all of these premises. I mean, I don't know what it is, whether or not he doesn't know how to write for these premises or if it's people interfering with his premises. I don't think it is, because it's consistent across all of his films. It's so strange. I mean, look, if he does well and he starts to do well, if he starts to do well like he did when he made Sixth Sense again, or Unbreakable, like a lot of people discredit Unbreakable. Unbreakable is actually not a horrible Shyamalan movie. If he starts at the very least working his way back towards that point, I'll help him. Okay, I will help. Okay, I'll use whatever little platform I have to assist in whatever way I can. But at the moment, it's not worthy of attention. It honestly isn't. I mean, if this is how he treats a television show, I can't imagine how The Visit is going to look. I can only imagine that's going to be awful. I mean, the premise itself, I mean, two kids go to their grandparents and it turns out that that the grandmother is possessed by some kind of demon, but the grandfather is fine. I mean, there's a bunch of red flags there as it is. I can't see. I'll be honestly shocked if it is good. I mean, I wasn't shocked when this was as bad as it was. I was horrified when it took the turns that it did, and was just so predictable. I'm talking in circles now. That's been my review. If I had to give this a rating, this whole series a rating, 4 out of 12. It's got good actors in it, but they're not acting well. It's got a good premise, but it's not used well. The scenery is bland. The character arcs are non-existent. There's nothing to invest in. There's nothing to hope for. It's just awfulness. It's 4 out of 12 for effort, right? I will give you 30% for effort. That is as high as I'm willing to go. This is probably the worst TV series I've ever seen, and I've watched a lot of bad TV series. Alright, peace out. I will see you in the next review.